Okay, I am unmuted now, Paul. I'm assuming I'm ready to go. Okay, welcome everybody. Okay, I'm glad to see so many people here. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ron Fields, and I recognize an awful lot of you either from the dance community or from the library, or you're just friends of mine, just from wherever you happen to be, and that's good. Okay. Uh, we're presenting tonight a program based on an idea that I had some months ago. Okay, and on behalf of the Elton Library in New Paltz, New York, okay, I'm able to actually bring my idea to fruition. In addition to presenting myself, I'd like to present a couple of people. First of all, Paul Edlin, who's my technical advisor here, because I am all thumbs with technology. So, he is helping me out here with, getting this all, on the road. And also John Girolico, our current, director at the library. He's in the house, and I'm glad to, that he is here. So with all that said, let me present the idea that I had some months ago. It occurred to me through things that I've read over the last several decades, actually, things I may have seen, rumors or whatever, that at one time in this country, there was what you might call a Black Hollywood. Now, Black Hollywood is kind of a misnomer from my research, simply because at the point in time that I'm talking about, the 20s, 30s, and 40s, there were very few Black people in Hollywood at the production end of making movies. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, the production end of making movies. In other words, Black movies. And we're talking about Black movies for Black people in the 20s and 30s. And the reason we're talking about that, the reason I put it that way, is because back then, most of the country was segregated, including cinema. So you didn't see Black people in films unless they were in very, very, very stereotypical roles. And I had known somehow that there was, you can almost call it an underground, even though that's the wrong word, an underground world of people, Black people, making films for Black people, starring Black people that were not in stereotypical roles, etc. In other words, just regular movies, but movies that Black people could see and take pride in. This intrigued me. I had never seen any of these movies, although I may have seen clips or whatever from whatever shows. Like I said, some of my knowledge goes back decades. But in doing some research, and I have to, thank YouTube, because YouTube had a lot of this stuff already packaged for me, I began to delve into it. I did remember one name, however, from all of this, even before I delved into YouTube, and that name was Micheaux, Micheaux. That's a last name. I didn't have a first name, and somehow I knew that he was one of the chief, if not the chief, filmmaker, Black filmmaker, back in the 20s and 30s, and even before. And sure enough, in my research, I found that to be the case. So what I've dug up are any number of films, many of them directed, produced, written, filmed, and casted by a man named Oscar Micheaux. Now I can speak all night about that, but I have two clips, two videos that I dug up from YouTube that should explain all of that and give you a very good grounding in what I'm going to do tonight. Okay, fairly good explanation. After that, I'll continue with the program in terms of what we intend to do for the next several months in terms of just educating people or exposing people to the things that I've been exposed to over the last several months, setting all of this up. After that, we'll have a brief discussion. I'll answer any questions or, address any comments that people have. And then I'll talk about what the next steps will be. So with that said, I will ask my technical advisor, director, and chief cook and bottle washer, Paul Edlin, to go ahead with the 2 videos that I have prepared. Take it away, Paul.
Is there supposed to be sound? There isn't any sound.
Paul, if you can hear me, there doesn't seem to be any sound. Paul, can you hear me? I am unmuted, I believe.
I'm unmuted too. It's soft on mine. I'm hearing the sound.
There's no sound playthrough. Oh,
Paul, when you share your screen, there's an option to share computer sound as well.
Okay.
So when you click the screen share option, down at the bottom of the box that pops up, there's an option to share computer sound, and you need to select that option before you share.
All right. I had that on earlier. Let me start again. I apologize for that.
And if you could start with the other clip, Paul, I think the one you're starting with has the Birth of a Nation in it. If you could start with the other one, that would be good.
You want that one?
Yes,
okay.
I think that's the one we started with this afternoon. So not the Birth of the Nation, but the other one.
The one, you want the one with the Birth of a Nation?
No, the
okay.
other one first, and Birth of the Nation second.
Right. So that's what I'm going to be putting on.
Okay.
So let me go into starting this again, and I apologize for this. And I will double make sure we've got everything on. And this is the story of Oscar Micheaux.
Actually, okay, could you put the other one on? Not the one about Oscar Micheaux, the other one.
Okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
And we will go with that one first. And
that's the one, yes.
Can everyone hear it?
yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
It was during the silent era when black characters first appeared in cinema, in 1915's Birth of a Nation. The blacks were played by white actors in blackface, and the characters were degrading stereotypes. In response to Birth of a Nation, a group of independent black filmmakers and talent sprung up during the silent era to give black audiences a more realistic portrayal of themselves. Stage actor Bert Williams became one of the first black film stars. Another black talent during this time was Paul Robeson, who got his start in New York theater and then progressively ended up in films such as Body and Soul. It was during the talkies period when mainstream Hollywood began to produce films starring African Americans. Films such as Hearts in Dixie, Hallelujah, and Green Pastures. But were these films accurate portrayals of men and women of color?
Morning, brother. Morning. Hey, Clay, you look like a good man. Oh, I try to be.
Hollywood was reflecting a lot of the social norms, the values, the whole mindset of white America with regard to people of color, and in particular the black American. So that the Hollywood films invariably attacked, vilified, denigrated people of color.
I mean, to be able to do that was, I mean, you know, it was an art, you know, just to try to do that. And they pulled it off in such a way that, you know, on one hand, you know, they were great actors. On one hand, there's this big argument about the disservice they did to African Americans, because all across the world, people started thinking that all African Americans talk like you.
Generally is, I usually ain't.
It was these types of images that led to a black separatist cinema movement during the 1930s and 1940s, which sought to counter the negative images that were being perpetrated by Hollywood. Through a steady stream of numerous films, this movement showed a larger panorama of black life.
May we bow our heads?
Bringing these positive images to the screen were the granddaddies of black film, Oscar Micheaux, Spencer Williams, and William Alexander.
The filmmaker that had the most impact on me was Oscar Micheaux, because when I read about him, he wrote, directed, produced, and did the distribution of his films. And so for me as a filmmaker, it planted the seed that I could write, direct, produce, and act in films.
Spencer Williams targeted his films towards the non-urban audience. Williams made films in different genres, everything from comedies.
Mr. Greeley said, "Go west, young man, and do your best,"
to dramas, to religious films, such as The Blood of Jesus, one of the first films to be inducted into the Congressional National Film Registry. But it was William Alexander who sought to show positive portrayals of black Americans, not only in his fictional films, The Fight Never Ends and Souls of Sin, but also in his series, Byline Newsreels.
Byline's roving cameraman is in the nation's capital.
These newsreels showed black people in real walks of life doing the things that they do. And black achievers professionally, he particularly focused on, because he felt the need for a sense of dignity in the black community.
It was the work of independent filmmakers such as these who set the stage for the films that followed during the 50s and 60s. Films such as those featuring Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, and Dorothy Dandridge in strong and dignified black roles.
This is my country. This is where I've done what I've done. And if there were a million crowds like you, all sick like you are sick, all shouting down, destroy, degrade, and if there were 20 million more sick enough to listen to them, you are still gonna lose. You're gonna lose, mister, because there is something in this country. Something so big, so strong that you don't even know.
The 70s also brought about a number of movies that featured African Americans in leading heroic roles.
For African Americans, it was the first time we had really a chance to see African Americans as leading men, as heroes. Because in the other films, they were usually, you know, the butler or, you know, the help or whatever, you know, whatever, but they never saved the day.
The works of independent black filmmakers have had an impact on the way African Americans are portrayed on television and movie screens today.
Those movies, you know, fueled me, and I guess the filmmakers, everybody else that saw those films, to make the movies that are being made now.
Our celebration of Black History Month and Hollywood's greatest black performers continues next on Turner Classic Movies.
Okay, Ron, I will start the other one over again.
That's fine, Paul. Go right ahead.
Let me get into there. Oscar Micheaux. I'm going to start it right from the beginning, and this time I'll get it right. All right.
You're not afraid of the dark, are you?
We're all familiar with great directors, such as Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing, Antoine Fuqua, The Equalizer, John Singleton, Boys in the Hood, Ava DuVernay, A Wrinkle in Time, the Hughes brothers, Dead Presidents, Bill Duke, A Rage in Harlem. But let me ask you, how much do you know about Oscar Micheaux? Born January 2nd, 1884, in Metropolis, Illinois, this African-American film director produced over 44 films. At the age of 17, he moved to Chicago, worked as a Pullman porter on a major railroad, saved his money, and later worked as a homesteader. This experience inspired him to write novels and films. He wrote 7 novels. In 1913, 1,000 copies of his first book, The Conquest, the story of a Negro homesteader, was printed. The Homesteader was a film released in 1919, and it was based on a man named Jean Baptiste, who falls in love with many white women but could not marry outside his race. The relationship deteriorated. He's not allowed to see her. She kills herself and after she kills her father. She's a mulatto, and the film deals with race relations. The Lincoln Motion Picture Company was a production company that Micheaux directed many of his films. It was founded by Noble and George Johnson in 1916. Noble Johnson was the president of the company, Clarence A. Brooks the secretary, Dr. James T. Smith the treasurer, and Dudley A. Brooks as the assistant director. It produced many race movies. Noble Johnson was an actor and also a film director. He appeared in many films such as The Mummy in 1932, The Most Dangerous Game in 1932, and King Kong and the Son of King Kong in 1933. In 1920, Micheaux directed his second film, Within Our Gates. He stated it was produced as a response to widespread social instability following World War I. The film starred Sylvia Landry, a mixed-race schoolteacher, as an adopted daughter of a sharecropper. Mr. Micheaux continued to produce many more successful films, like The Temptation in 1935. Betrayal came out in 1948. a film responding to racial identity in rural South Dakota. Murder in Harlem was produced in 1935, and it was based on an African-American male framed for murdering a white woman. The Great and Only. The Exile came out in 1931. Stace England and the Salt Kings. Black Magic. Underworld. Body and Soul, and many, many more films were produced. The Swing was a 1938 film starring Mandy Jenkins. As a cook for a white wealthy family in Birmingham, Alabama, she discovers that her husband was having an affair and confronts him in the nightclub.
I might as well get up from here and go cook those white folks some breakfast. So it's you.
Well, what's the matter, honey? What's wrong?
All night laying around with other women.
No, you know it isn't so, baby. I was out trying to win a little money. You know how it is.
Yes, and I got to go to work and... with you outside. No, I'm asking you like a lady. Please step outside. It won't take long. No, I won't go.
Now look at here, Mandy. Let me tell you something.
His films continue to feature contemporary black life. He dealt with racial relationships between blacks and whites and challenges for blacks trying to achieve success. He opposed racial injustice that African Americans received. Lynchings, job discrimination, rape, mob violence, and economic exploitation. His work opened doors for many other directors for the future, beginning with the great Gordon Parks. Melvin Van Peebles. The legendary Ozzie Davis. Ivan Dixon. And Gina Prince Bythewood. Out of the many awards after his death in 1951, in 1987, he was recognized with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Okay. I think we're done, are we not, Paul?
Yes, we are with both films.
Okay, very good. Then I shall continue. Okay, I previewed, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so similar clips. I picked those two as probably the best ones to give you sort of a taste of some of the research I've done and for some of what you're in for. What I intend to do from now on, for the next several months, is give you a chance to preview some of these films that I've selected. I've selected at least half a dozen, maybe more. And what I intend to do is to let you know which films are on deck. You will have a month to view the film. Okay, so you can see the film at your leisure. They are all available on YouTube. We will give you the link. It is in our, it will be in our newsletter. It will be publicized, etc. I will give you the title a month in advance. So even if you didn't have the link, you could always just search the title through YouTube and get the movie that way. So you have a month to see the movie. At the end of a month, we'll come back together just like we are now to discuss it. What I really want to do is have people look at these films from whatever point of view you choose to, but not just from a cinematic point of view, but from a sociological point of view as well. I previewed many of these films, and I couldn't help but notice that they are different, obviously, but I'm not just talking about the technology of the 1930s versus the 21st century. I'm talking about how Black people would have viewed these films back then. So pay particular attention to what you see in terms of how the actors are acting, what diction they're using. Also, take a look at the background. What do you see? What do you see in the expressions on the people's faces, etc.? And see if you can compare that to whatever, films you may have seen in the same, time period, but in more conventional films. Dare I say, white films that, like I said, were prevalent back somewhere between 1930 and 1950. So hopefully this should, spark a rather lively discussion, whatever. But my overall purpose in doing this whole project is to expose as many people as possible to what I didn't know. I had heard rumors, like I said earlier, I had seen snatches of whatever, but it wasn't until I actually dived into this and, saw the films in their entirety and viewed them the way I just explained that I wanted you to, did I really realize this whole, pseudo underground cinematic world existed without anybody knowing about it except Black people back then. Even Black people now, I'm not sure, realize, what happened. So much for my buildup. I've done all of the talking so far. If anyone has any comments now is the time. Okay, the way we can do this is you can unmute yourselves. Okay, we'll see if that works without extraneous noise creeping in and people talking over one another. But if you have comments or questions, I'll be more than happy to entertain them. So go ahead, the floor is yours.
Mr. Fields,
yes.
If you could explain to me or paint a picture of the segregated theater. Were they Black-owned theater houses? Was there a Black night at a white-owned theater house? Were they white-owned, but they were a Black theater house because of what they played? What did that look like?
Let me explain that to you. It's a very good question. Let's go back to, say, 1935, okay? And let's talk about New York City. And I think this would go for most major cities in the North. Okay, the South was a completely different thing. But in New York City, Black people could go to any theater they wanted. Okay, they can sit anywhere they wanted as long as they sat in the balcony. But Black people had the privilege of looking at Black films, white films, or whatever. However, the first part of your question is an important one. The theaters that you would go to downtown, let's say on Broadway or whatever, any of the studio theaters, the Roxy, the Lowe's, etc., did not play Black cinema. They played the films that you would mostly be familiar with from the 30s, 40s, etc. If you were Black, you lived in a Black neighborhood. In New York City, that was Harlem. And in Harlem, you had theaters that were Black. And what I mean by that is that they played both Black and white films, okay? The white films would cost more, obviously, but the Black films were played only in Black theaters. I'm not even sure white people knew that black films existed. Okay, so if you were black in Harlem in 1935 and went to say the Renaissance Theater on 135th Street, chances are you saw a black film. Okay, and that's kind of the way it was. So the way I think of it, black people had the best of all possible worlds because they could go downtown and see The Wizard of Oz, a Busby Berkeley movie, Gold Diggers, 1933. They could watch Humphrey Bogart, Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, and on and on and on. Okay, but they could also go uptown and see themselves. So could white people if they wanted to. And I'm not sure that there weren't white people that didn't do this. But again, we're talking about segregation, not legal segregation, but segregation culturally. So white people did not go uptown unless they were going to a speakeasy or a nightclub. And usually they went to nightclubs where black people weren't allowed. But white people generally did not go to black theaters, either because they didn't know about them, they may have been afraid, or whatever. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Did Oscar Micheaux's films, were they only black actors? Did he have some white characters in them as well?
Generally, no. There are white characters, in some of his films, but they're rare, somewhat rare. If the plot called for, say, a white policeman, a white detective, a white official, for example, then he would employ a white actor, simply because that was just realistic. For example, if a black man went before a judge, chances are the judge was white. So a white actor had to portray that judge. If we're talking about, dare I say it, a lynching or a beating or something like that down south, and he did that, okay, he did portray that, obviously those actors had to be white just to fit the character. So to answer your question, yes. Okay, but you have to also take a look at how black people would have looked at those white actors, how they would look at the characters in the film. They were supposed to be white, okay? They could not be portrayed by black people for very obvious reasons. So basically, his movies were all black, except that the character had to be white.
Could I add a little bit about a different growing up perspective?
Absolutely.
So I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and there were two white theaters that I went to regularly, and there was a black theater called the Diamond Theater, and much to my regret, I have no idea what went on there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit later than the films we're talking about, but I can't imagine it was that much different. But I have no idea.
Well, that's my point, Carol. That's exactly my point, and why I'm presenting this program. White people had no idea. You had no reason to go to that theater because you had theaters of your own. It was not even a choice for you. It didn't occur to you, nor would it have occurred 10 years earlier to any white person anywhere to do that, unless they were very, very, very adventurous or lost, one or the other. Okay, so thank you for that. I think you, kind of, bore out, my assumptions about, who went to which theaters and saw what. Anyone else?
Did he have, was he successful financially with producing films? Was this lucrative for him?
No. He did this on a shoestring. I don't think he was ever even close to what you would call rich. I think of what Misho did and others. He wasn't the only one. He was just the primary one. as the ultimate independent filmmaker. Okay, like filmmakers today, minus the money that filmmakers, independent filmmakers today can garner. I imagine that an independent filmmaker today probably has a lot of studio money behind him or her. I don't think Spike Lee spends his own money, you know, making his films, although he writes them and he casts them and he does a lot of the work himself. He has a production staff. He wouldn't be able to produce what he does without that. Micheaux, completely different. He operated pretty much the way any cinematographer would have operated in, say, between 1900 and 1910. You take a camera, you go out in the street, and you film almost anything. And after you got sophisticated, or your audience got sophisticated, you began to write scripts and employ actors or cajole actors somehow to do what you wanted them to do. And the actors that you were able to convince to do this were probably stage actors. And if they were Black, they were probably entertainers, but not cinematic actors and so on and so forth. So Micheaux went out, you know, he wrote on his own, okay? Probably somebody did the camera work for him, although initially he probably did it himself. Did most of the work himself. It costs money to develop film. It costs money to duplicate film, okay? It costs money to get the films to the theaters and so on and so forth. So I think what drove Misho is what drives any artist, just the need to produce art, and film was his art. Did he get rich doing that? I seriously doubt it. Okay, I imagine he was close to bankrupt most of the time. Any other comments, questions, whatever? Keep them coming. This is, you know, stimulating for me.
Well, I apologize for missing the first part. I was driving. I missed my.
Oh.
So now here I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to learn because I know I'm so ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a friend who is a blues singer,
mm-hmm.
and she just put up on her Facebook page, what does it mean to be white?
Mm-hmm.
And very interesting comments. And I am struggling with that somewhat, but I can put it off for 3 days because I'm not faced with things every day of my life.
Right.
And so I just thought it was an incredible question for this blues singers from Michigan who I've known since I was 19, 20, 29. Anyway, I'm here to learn. So I really appreciate what you're doing, Ron.
Well, we're all here to learn, and I really appreciate you being here, Betty. I really do. I was, didn't tell this to anyone, but I was a little worried about how many people wanted to show up. So I called up some of my friends and, you know, all of this sort of thing. I didn't know who was interested, but I had a real desire to let as many people know about this as possible. And like you, Betty, I was ignorant too. You know, I thought of this project back in March, April, you know, whenever, and I knew nothing. I knew Micheaux's last name. That's all that I knew. That was it. Okay, and you know, fortunately, as I mentioned earlier, YouTube has a lot of his and other, you know, films that can be viewed, but who knows that? So the purpose of this whole project is to just let everybody know that this exists and it is accessible. And through this program, you will get a chance to see maybe half a dozen movies, you know, between now and February or whatever. I haven't really thought about ending the project, but I pretty much thought about doing this, you know, maybe 5 or 6 times, you know, movies that we can discuss. And the rest is up to you. You know, by then you will know what you're looking at, you will know where to look, you will know how to look, and you will know how to view critically. And therein lies your education. And once that happens, we will no longer be ignorant. We will not know everything, but we will know enough to get us started.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Did he receive any acclaim while he was alive or posthumously?
Not that I know. Posthumously, yes. You know, as the video showed you, he did get a, you know, walk in the Hollywood Hall of Fame, etc. But like a lot of really great people, most of the accolades came after his death. Okay. While he was alive, I don't think he got much recognition at all. Okay. People may have recognized his name, but they were Black people. And towards the end of his career, into the late 40s, his movies were getting old. In other words, they were kind of downplayed even by Black people, because this, and I think one of the videos, you know, pointed this out. By this time, Black people are getting better roles in film. They are no longer as stereotypical as they were, even though you still didn't see a lot of Black people in films in the late 40s, early 50s, and there was still stereotype there. But I can remember watching movies where there were people like Canada Lee and Juano Hernandez, names you probably don't know, but I do because I read credits. And these were Black people who showed up in films as Black people, okay? They may have portrayed a Black character, okay? And that might have been played up, but the character was not stereotypical. In other words, they weren't elevator operators or waiters or whatever. They weren't step and fetch it people. They were just people who happened to be Black, or they were characters that were supposed to be Black, and they played a Black character, which you might view as stereotypical, but it wasn't as stereotypical as it might have been back 10 years earlier. And that began in the late 40s, up through the 50s. Like they said, Sidney Poitier is a good example, and so on and so forth. The thing I like about Sidney Poitier, as opposed to Harry Belafonte and some of the others, is that Poitier didn't sing or dance, okay? He acted. You know, a lot of the other Black actors and actresses, they're actors too, sang, danced, and that's how they got into cinema, not so Poitier. So he may have been the first star or pseudo star to actually do that. I could be wrong about that, but just off the top of my head,
yeah.
You know, like I said, he was preceded by other actors that I could name, but you wouldn't recognize the names.
What about the Davises, Ozzie and Ruby? Did they dance and sing?
They did not, as far as I know. And I think the Davises may have come after Poitier, but I'm not sure about that. They may have been, I know they were contemporaries, but who came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know.
Right.
But as far as the Davises, you know, are concerned, and we're not talking about Sammy Davis, we're talking about Ossie Davis and his wife, Ruby. They were very dramatic actors, very good actors, okay? And, you know, that's another good example of, you know, Black actors who acted, who got into cinema, not because of any other entertainment skill, but because of their acting prowess.
Could I just say real quickly, one of my earliest really memorable favorites was In the Heat of the Night with Sidney Poitier.
Yes, 1967.
He was acting. He was definitely not dancing and singing.
Yeah, I would ask you to check out some of his earlier, you know, films. By then he was a star. I mean, he had acted in a number of things.
Well, I'm not that old.
Yeah, no, but yeah, I actually, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you can go back into the archive, I mean, you can research this. If you go back to the stuff that he did in like 1950 up through 54, that's real acting.
Sure, I'll do that. But I was just in elementary school then, so what can I say?
Okay. What, in the Heat of the Night? Okay, yeah.
No. In the Heat of the Night, I was old enough to go see it.
Right.
And I just was, you know.
Yeah. So
I'll do that, Ron. I will do that.
There are lots of films of his that I could recommend to you. Blackboard Jungle being a very good one. And he does an acting tour de force in that. Other questions, comments, keep them coming. I love this stuff.
I've been an Abby Lincoln fan for quite a long time. And
Yes.
one night I was visiting my mother, and she always had cable TV, which I don't subscribe to. But I stayed up particularly late, and I caught an early role with Abby Lincoln in a film.
Mm-hmm.
And the name of the film was Only a Man. And it portrayed Abby Lincoln as the daughter, the oldest daughter, I think, of a minister in the South. And she falls in love with a migrant worker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, it's kind of one of those plots that has many elements to the lives of people. And it supposedly, so I did a little research, and supposedly she was an actress before she was a singer.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, as I may have mentioned, that's how a lot of Black people broke into cinema, in the early days and the middle days, depending on what the middle days are. You got noticed because of your entertainment abilities to sing, to dance, and so on. And that's how you got into cinema. Until, like I said, you were known for your cinematic abilities right off. And, like I said, I mentioned a number of actors that, were able to do that. Before this goes much further, I mean, we can keep the questions and comments coming, but I do want to mention, if I haven't already, that the film I want you to watch, and the link is in the newsletter of the library, it's accessible, is Murder in Harlem, an Oscar Micheaux film, 1935. And between now and a week from now, that is next Wednesday, you have to watch that film in its entirety. And we will meet here next Wednesday, October 7th, same time, 7 o'clock, okay, to discuss the film. So I believe it's the same link, although I don't know that. And if it isn't, then you will be sent the link. And all you have to do is to just register the same way most of you did today. And if you do that, you will get the link automatically. And like I said, I assume that's how most of you got here this time. So,
it'll be a new link. So,
pardon me, say again?
It'll be a new link.
Yes.
And there was another question on the recording, and I will work with Margaret and John's team, and we'll get it loaded up onto YouTube so people can don't have to download it and go through all that hassle. That'll take a day or two.
What recording was that? Sorry, what recording was that?
This meeting is being recorded. So
can I get the first part? Can I see what I missed?
Things on a recording, so I'm missing.
Can I see what I've missed?
In the recording, sure.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna upload this to YouTube. It will take a few days to get it up there, but once it is up, we will post the link to our Facebook page, and you can view this recording as many times as you like.
Will we need to register every week for every session, or are we?
We'll have to work on it. There is a way so that you can have a recurring meeting, and you can register once, and you can save the link. We've done that in another case, and we'll set it up to do it this way too.
If you are interested in having a recurring link sent to you, if you could please email events@eltinglibrary.org one more time and say, I would like to just have this link sent to me every week, or I would like to receive the recurring link, however we set it up, that would be very helpful for us to know that you are interested.
Yeah. We'll work it out. We're doing that with the children's room. So it does work. I have to go, Ron.
Okay.
And what I'm going to do is turn off the recording, if that's okay with everyone, because there are some limits. But anyone, and I'll save the chat function. People have sent words on chat.
Oh, okay.
So I'll leave it up otherwise.
Okay. And I see that Margaret has put up the, you know, the